Hello, everyone, and welcome to the June edition of the IQ Media Masterclass. I every month feel like it's been a year since the last masterclass, but also 2 days. And I'm back here with another guest. I'm Madeleine White. I'm VP Marketing at Pool and co-founder of the Audiences, but also supporting IQ Media Hub with helping publishers to innovate in the digital transformation space. And there's no one better in that industry to speak to than Francesca. So welcome.
Thank you. What an introduction.
I know. Well, I mean, you're talking about engagement primarily online, which is probably one of those words that we hear in pretty much any conversation about digital transformation and digital strategies for publishers. And so the fact that you're talking about it so deeply and analyzing this word with so many different publishers around the world and experts in this market, it's incredibly valuable for publishers. So maybe you could start by sharing a bit about what you do.
Yes, of course. So Francesca Dumas, very quick introduction. I am one of the co-founders of Contribly, but I'm also the director of audience engagement in Contribly. Contribly has two sides to it. On one side, it's all about the tech to engage directly with readers. And on the other side, it is so much about those strategies. And I've been working with news brands, editorial teams, journalists around the topic of engagement for quite a while now. And one of the things that we do is we also have a podcast that kind of tries to unravel what that means, like that word engagement, because we all use engagement so often. And actually, there are so many different definitions for it. Yeah. Some people measure that as, time spent on page or page views. Some people measure it as newsletter signups. But we mainly focus specifically on that idea of two-way engagement. So I can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so that's going to be the topic today, right? So we were talking about this earlier about how everyone understands or has heard of this word of user-generated content. And I mean, commenting, for instance, has been a long-established kind of strategy for digital publishers to engage their audience. But what about going a step further and creating a two-way street, having that way of journalists to then get back in touch with readers and then readers to respond? And you called it community-generated content.
Yes, I did. I think I try and stay away from the idea of UGC, so the user-generated content, because I think so many people automatically think of social media. And it's this dangerous other place where the content isn't verified and it's not really our audience that we're engaging with. So we prefer to use the term CGC, community generated content. But for us, it's about what you were saying, that two-way engagement. It's about not just comments at the end of a page where, journalists do the fantastic job of writing their article, putting it out there into the world, almost like my job is done. And then the comments happen kind of after. What we're trying to look at is how can we invite our audience in to be part of that conversation, almost from before you're writing the article, within what you are doing, after, and then having a whole cycle that goes around it where we are continuously building a relationship with the people that we're meant to be serving.
And ultimately that benefits journalism and the media's business as well as the readers themselves. If we're better serving those readers, they're going to be more fulfilled in the jobs to be done kind of system. But also it means that it's naturally fueling our journalism as well as helping to monetize what journalists are doing.
Yeah, exactly. And I think everybody follows a lot of data. We collect so much data and it is extremely valuable, but we also assume so much out of it. So like time spent on page, we go, oh, well, they were clearly extremely engaged. But that reader might actually be sitting there going, well, I completely disagree with all of this. We're assuming through that data so much information. And actually, sometimes the only way to really know what our audience is thinking, what questions they might be asking, what expertise they might have, which in a lot of the cases, we have a lot of experts within our audience. The only way to do that is to engage in a two-way conversation and not something that happens after, and stop broadcasting at people, but actually invite them in. So there's a lot of ways of doing that. And I guess that's the bit of the challenge in itself, is that how do we do this at scale in a way that actually benefits everybody?
Yeah. And I guess that ultimately this is the benefit of digital over print, and maybe that first step of someone going from print mindset where you literally are talking to and you have no feedback directly on the site or before, even like you do with digital, the first step is obviously to start thinking about that two-way conversation, to make use of the data and the digital opportunities, and then to make that on scale and really integrate that into every step of the funnel. So that's kind of what you're going to be talking to us about today, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's actually a really interesting point in what you've just said, because we've moved from this print to digital world, and yet when we were only in print, a lot of journalists were doing a lot of this stuff anyway. Like, they did have sources, they were building relationships, they were out there getting to know people and building trust with their sources anyway. This is exactly the same thing, but I think so many of the principles that used to happen when we were in this physical world have kind of gone out the window when we've gone to digital, because we can just ask and not necessarily think of giving back. And that, I think, is it's the humanity behind it that we need to kind of remember, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's also maybe the link to product teams, because with digital, you need to build the spaces and the functionalities in order to make all of this conversation and two-way discussion possible. And so you can't have siloed teams. You need product and editorial to work together. And this word bridge role that keeps coming up is the link between the two, and the importance of editorial being clear and transparent with product teams about, okay, we need this in order to build this relationship, and how can you help us build a space for that on the site, or integrate that into the user journey or into registration or whatever.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Like, yes. But I think it's also it's about the different teams also understanding the value of that, because I think everybody has their vision of what that means, and it's very hard to imagine what these spaces might look like when actually engagement is so important, but yet we need to make these decisions without necessarily always having the exact proof of how it's going to go. And I think actually for a lot of not only journalists, but a lot of teams, there is a fear to try. And we hear this a lot, like journalists saying, well, what if I don't get much content? What if no one responds? Or what if too many people respond? What if I get too much? How am I going to deal with this? And actually, those things actually tell us so much about our audience as well. If we get too much, well, clearly we've hit something relevant, and there are so many, it's a massive opportunity. And if we're not getting anything, well, maybe that's a hint that the angle or the story that you're going down might not be the right story, or might not be looked at in the right way, and you might want to adapt it, and it actually might save you so much time before you get there. So breaking down those silos is absolutely huge. I totally agree.
And on testing, you just hit on that very, was it the cheesy phrase that everyone says, that no test is a fail, it's just learning, or something like that. But it's exactly what you just said.
Yes.
And testing, it's about learning more about your audience and putting your audience first, ultimately.
And
Shall we jump into your slides, your workshop?
Yeah, sure. We can try. This isn't about Contribly, but I am going to talk about CGC engagement specifically. We work around this idea of engagement, but CGC, so community generated content engagement, is slightly different. It is about that two-way conversation. And I think we kind of look at it from a point of view of where people are starting, and also why you might want to do this. And I think it's really important to touch on that. The first is, normally your newsroom or you as an individual might sit somewhere along this line. So for us, a 1 would be that you're not receiving any community generated content at all. Or if you are, it's not necessarily coming directly to you. So that relationship that is direct hasn't necessarily started. For us, a number 2 is that you're getting random CGC. So maybe you've got a very open call out or open space where readers can send their news, or there's a community sharing area that happens somewhere else on your site. Then we would look at like a 3. And for us, a 3 is the point where you are starting to lead that conversation. You are starting to invite readers in to engage directly with you. You are potentially finding out what works, what doesn't, but you're mainly focusing on, how do I increase quality? How do I increase quantity? How do I moderate all of this at scale? And once you've got that process thing down, you might be at a 4, which is that starting of seeing the real value of what CGC engagement can do. You're either building reader habits, trying to get them to come back. You are delivering an actual value exchange with your readers where your readers feel valued or get something out of engaging with you directly. And at this point, you should be collecting loads and loads of super, super valuable data to continue building your plans. And with 5, not to forget the dirty, marketing-y, salesy, commercial word, it's the idea that all of that engagement, everything that you have built up is actually benefiting the news brand so that they can actually have that relationship and know how much that is worth so that they can continue investing in it. So I don't know where everyone sits, but this is the way that we see engagement moving forward. And when we were talking, Madeline, a second ago about the whole testing piece, it's about building something that isn't just one activity that we have done and we've gone, tick, fantastic, we've done some engagement, but actually building out a strategy that lasts a lot longer and that actually develops throughout time with our editorial teams.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I was thinking where the majority of publishers maybe fall on that scale. But so many are, I think, focused more towards the commercial value first before thinking of it in these stepping stones. So like it's subscription first rather than community first, which skips a lot of these important steps and maybe in particular the value that they could gain from these steps. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's a bit like try before you buy. Everybody needs to have started a relationship before they start paying. If you're going to buy a sofa, for example, you're going to go and check out that sofa a few times. Well, unless you're crazy and you just love it and then there we go and the budget isn't an issue. But most of the time when there's so many options out there, we tend to look at where we want to spend our money. And part of that is we're looking at building authentic relationships, not just a moment in time where I wanted to see one article, I start paying and then potentially you've got a massive churn at the end of it. So yeah, that definitely. And go on.
No, my metaphor is you wouldn't marry someone at first sight.
Absolutely.
Build the relationship first, unless you're literally on Marriage at First Sight or whatever the TV show is. But you have to build that relationship up first. And so what you're saying, basically, in less metaphorical terms, is that you can launch a subscription model. But it's only going to be a success for your less engaged readers if you've got these other steps before, because you need all of those in order to encourage someone to actually be convinced by your value proposition and by what you're offering in a premium product.
And I think there's also, because there's that engagement piece, this is one type of engagement. There's so many things that we can be engaging with. It can be gamification. You could have games on your site. Within your product, you haven't just got one thing, but it is about, I love the dating metaphor. That is fantastic. but it is about this audience, the audience that actually go to the effort of contributing, of not just passively reading, but actually trying to directly engage with you. This is your most valuable audience. These are the people who are more likely to subscribe. These are the people who are more likely to stay loyal to your news brand. We found 51% of people who have been published at some point in a news brand are more likely to subscribe and stay loyal to that news brand. And also they're the ones that are going to share and talk about what you're doing with everybody else. So understanding the value of this core audience and really getting to know them is going to create so much more relevance for others as well. And it's pretty crucial. We talk about it a lot, but what does it actually look like is always what we struggle with, I think.
Yeah, definitely. No, but this is really clear.
Yeah. And then I think if that isn't clear enough, I think there are some things around why we should be doing this kind of engagement. Now that search is a whole issue, engaged traffic is algorithm proof. And that's what we're trying to build is traffic that comes directly to our sites. Traffic that doesn't necessarily, or giving them a reason as well to, if they are on socials, to come and engage. Our audience doesn't necessarily know the difference between news and social media, but we compare ourselves to news and social media. And in reality, we need to be creating a product that's very different to social so that that audience feels that they're getting some kind of value from it. And as I said before, active readers, probably your most important readers. They are the ones that are going to subscribe, talk about you, share. getting to know them is so essential. And I think we know them from a data point of view, and the data teams know them and the product teams know them. But I don't think there is a very clear way for our editorial team to know that those users easily. And then loyalty, of course, it builds relevance. You understand so much about your readers when you're engaging with them directly, the questions that they might be asking, their points of view. You really get to understand where your black holes might be. What kind of audiences aren't engaging? Is there a way that you could engage with those better? Maybe it's young people. Maybe it's a specific area within your town or city that never seems to try and tell stories or never tries to engage. Maybe there's something that you could do to serve that community better. And at the end of the day, we're all here to try and save news. So that future proofing of the business, gathering the right data, is what's going to help us in the long run. But yeah, it's all about trust, two-way engagement, and building relevance, really.
Yeah, it makes me think of metric that someone brought up the other day, which is going a step further than engagement. And you might have seen this on the audiences, but belonging.
Yes.
And all of this hits it, because if you see yourself inside the journalism, you belong there. You feel like you're a part of it, and a part of not just a brand, but a community and the wider readership, the journalists, the people, basically. And belonging is very people orientated. It's not about brands. It's about the people who around that brand. And so that only comes trust and belonging, building habits, having relevance, having active readers, continued engagement. That only comes through belonging and that kind of engagement.
We completely miss out the emotional part of why people make decisions. I think we so easily look at data and we completely ignore that actually people are loyal because of emotions. People choose to buy things most of the time because of emotions. Mm-hmm. You don't learn from someone you don't like. And I think that's why that focus on authenticity, and especially in this digital world, when we talk about the Reuters reports, and when they're looking at Gen Z, they are used to being in this digital world. And yet we've created so many news pages where there's no authenticity in that. But I think the other part that you mentioned on belonging, we did an interview a couple of weeks ago, and someone described it as, and I absolutely love this, although you pay your university, you don't feel like you are a customer of your university. You are part of and you would still call yourself an alumni once you'd left. And there is an emotional attachment, and that is belonging. And we really want to get to that point. That's real loyalty, is to get to a point where our news brand represents people. And there was a time where people would, have their photo taken at the school play, and it would go out in print, and the grandmothers and the parents would cut it out and save those clippings. There's such an emotional side to what we do that we still can create in digital. We just really need to go back to those emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, that's, I guess, audiences first, having audiences first mindset. That's audiences, they're people, they've got emotions. They're not just numbers on a screen. Absolutely.
And then we have focus on core principles when we're thinking of what that engagement brings. For us, it's engagement, first of all. Are we building stuff on our sites that's sticky, that's relevant, that makes readers want to come back? For us, the second piece is content. Everything that we create in the news is content. And actually, how can we make sure that we use that CGC, that content, and put those readers into what we do? I think so much of the time we might create a call out. I don't know. It's World Dog Day. Hey, send us your cutest dog photos. And I know it's not serious news, but it happens. And we'll receive 100, and we might publish 5 of the best. But then we've got 95 people who've gone to the effort to engage and have sent in their content, and yet nothing has happened. So that's one thing. And then our last piece is data. Every engagement, social media collects all of the data, and yet we engage and don't necessarily collect the right data, and we don't use that data to understand our audience properly. And I know we've got hundreds, thousands of pieces of data everywhere right now, but this is a very different, very valuable piece of first-party data that we're learning. So these are the three things that we always focus on in Contribly. But what I'd love to do is share some examples of how others have done this, so that at the end of the session, we can go through a bit of an engagement strategy builder exercise that everyone can kind of take home and think about as well when they're going on this journey. How does that sound?
Perfect. Amazing. I'm excited.
Great. Well, let me share a little bit about the Irish Times as a first piece. I think the Irish Times are really interesting because I don't know if people knew. People born in Ireland, 1 out of every 6 people born in Ireland actually live abroad. So they've got...
It's why there's so many Irish pubs. I'm telling
everywhere.
you. There is an Irish pub everywhere. Everywhere you go. I once saw an Irish pub on a beach in Cape Verde, and there was no other restaurants, nothing else around. And
Just an Irish pub.
This is the proof that they make their mark.
They do. They get around, these Irish. And it's actually really interesting because for the Irish Times, they could see in their data that readers were coming to their website from all over the world. And yet all of their news is about islands. So it's quite interesting to think, well, who are these people? What do we know about them? And instead of just trying to go through the data of what countries they've come from, they approached it in a really interesting way, which was to create a call out to those readers. And it was very simple. It was like, hey, if you're Irish and you live abroad, how about you introduce yourself? And it was so interesting in terms of results. So in this case, the readers could upload their photos, their videos, their stories of themselves wherever they are around the world. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories came in. Some of them were so amazing, they became their own articles. But what was particularly interesting is how people were engaging with that. The first bit was all of that content was being used. And that's so important. Some of it becomes their own articles, some of them becomes their own pieces, but none of that engagement is being wasted. And people don't tend to come back if nothing happens when they've gone to the effort of writing a story or trying to engage. The second part is we always hear, oh, well, what about the quality of this UGC or this CGC that's going to come in? When we model what we're looking for, that makes such a difference. And so, because people aren't going to send in worse quality than what others have already done. So that idea of actually showing what is coming in makes a huge difference. And then for the Irish Times, this taught them so much about their community. And I think that's the interesting part. They learned that a considerable amount of these people sending in their content were actually nurses living abroad. And this is information they never had before. Social media has it. It's collecting all of the data. They know exactly what the algorithm is feeding them. But for the Irish Times, that was so new. And it meant that they could start really delving into content that's relevant to that audience. What is it like to be a nurse in Canada or New Zealand or South Africa? Or even when nurses started striking, they could actually contact them directly and say, hey, we want to be the news brand that actually represents you. Tell us what's going on. Why are you striking? And it started with something as simple as that, but it built over time so many more products within what they were doing. They created a call out about parenting, for example, and that was so valuable. And there were so many points of view and there were so many questions within that eventually they ended up creating a whole newsletter for parenting that involved teachers' input into homeschooling, involved parents talking about things that they can do at home to keep them busy. It really kind of grew from there, and it's about the people, which is what's so strong. And, you know, when you're doing this day in, day out, magic can come out of it, really. But
yeah,
go on.
It's such a heartwarming story as well. Thanks so much for sharing. I think it reminds us that you can have individual stories as well, but you can also create this collective of people. I mean, each of those people in the photos, they will be able to see themselves in this and then later feel more a part of the journalism as the Irish Times learns about who they are and better adapts content to these readers as well. So it's this ecosystem of fueling journalism with community generated content that then fuels communities to contribute more and be more engaged and continuously build up that cycle that can only do good things for both readers and the publisher.
And I think there is an expectation on the reader's side. When they share on social, they get some likes, they get some comments, something happens, and that's a value exchange for them.
Yeah.
What does that look like on our sites? But also, just from this activity here, for example, they had a whole load of Irish people in the US. And when protests start breaking out, they can actually contact them and say, hey, can you give us an Irish perspective on what's going on there? And that's so powerful as well, because you would never have had those stories otherwise. Very unlikely without asking. And when you ask, sometimes you get.
Yeah, it's creating that basically list of contactable readers. And that's what Daily Maverick have done as well in the onboarding journey for new members. Maverick Insiders, they collect info on what you're an expert in and what your job is. And so they have this list of contactable experts from across the country, but also abroad, on so many different topics that they've always got people to contact. And they're insiders as well, they're members.
It's so great. It's the kind of data we need to be collecting. But I think it's also about the transparency of what we're doing with that and how we're inviting them in. And I think
Yes.
Daily Maverick do a fantastic job of that as well. Maybe I'll show you another example, because I think there's some learnings from each of them.
Yeah.
Media House, so GVA, set the scene, local brand in Belgium, Flemish side of Belgium, around Antwerp. And for them, and I think this is really important, it's that idea that you have an aim when you're starting your engagement strategy. Because if not, we might do everything. And actually, in this case, for example, for Media House Ireland, their aim was Media House in Belgium.
Still stuck on the Irish.
I know. What they tried to focus on was, we want to build reader habits. We want readers to come back to us every day. So they created discussions each day, and the topic changes, but it's only open from a certain time to a certain time. And I think that's really interesting. It brings that nostalgia back of when, well, at least I was younger, and you came back on a Tuesday night because you wanted to watch, I don't know,
Yes.
Desperate Housewives.
Yeah. And then the next day you talk about it at school with everyone, because it's that,
Exactly.
it was that day each week.
And if you missed it, you missed it, and you just had to watch the recap the week after, and it always felt so annoying. There's a bit of that nostalgia to it, and that's really great, because people will come back to see what others are saying. But what they also do, which I absolutely love, they create, so the idea, at least with that, the way that we approach it, is you create a call out. You're asking for something specific, and the specificity of it is actually quite important. If you make your call out too broad, you might not get anything. If you make it too specific, it might be difficult. So there is a fine art to it that we learn as we go along, and different communities react in different ways. But in this case, it's very much, a discussion around, I don't know, the new parking policy is changing in Antwerp. Tell us what you think of the parking policy. And that's the debate of the day. And then the next article is the exact same gallery with the exact same comments, but one of the comments is the headline to incite more users, because no one wants to be the first to contribute either. And I think that's quite important. It's, you need to kind of feed it for it to grow, for people to get excited. But the second bit is, then you might actually use so many of the comments in your final piece, which in their case was, these are the new parking policies. These are the questions that you brought up. We're answering those, and you can continue that exact same conversation below. And that happens in one day. So imagine how much engagement is happening over that time. And then the next day, completely new topic. And it could be sports. And you start realizing, wow, people are really engaging in these topics. They work really well. So fantastic. For GVA, for example, 3 to 10 times more time spent on page, and also 3 to 5 times more page views. So really interesting for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It almost turns into a community board as well, a place where readers feel like they have a say in important topics in a community, and especially when it's a local regional publisher, that can really play into the idea of even Facebook groups and WhatsApp groups, that we are so much more trusting of those groups because we feel like we're amongst people that also believe in the same topics or in the same region or community in person. And so you're debating, you're sharing your views with people that have similar views to your own, and can, I guess, understand each other
and care about the same things. We found, and I think it's particularly interesting, quality is always something that comes up. And actually, we found that the quality, or the news brands have actually found, not us, the quality of the content that's coming in directly on these sites around these discussions is far, far, far superior than what's happening on social media. And I think there's this world where on social media you can so easily be insulted. It can almost become this poisonous place. And there are so many people who want to have a voice, but that doesn't feel like the right place to do it. Yeah. And I think there is a massive opportunity in our news brands to lead some of these conversations in a safe way that really makes everyone feel like they are making a difference, because people contribute for different reasons. It could be, so motivation is either intrinsic or extrinsic. And it's either because, you want to show off, you want someone to see what you're doing, or you might be in print, how exciting, or actually you really care about these topics and you want to try and make a difference and you don't really know how to do that. And I think that feeling of connection is something that we can really foster within our different news brands, local or international.
Yeah, 100%.
Maybe I'll show you another example?
Yes, please do.
I love this one. Love Farmers Weekly. Really interesting community. For them, they focus on data. So for them, their challenge was they were moving from a legacy system. They have a really passionate group of farmers that follow them, and they wanted to use their content to make sure that they understand that everything that the Farmers Weekly do is about the farmers that they serve. So they do loads of things, but super photo focused, and they use all of their photos that they receive. They do photo competitions, for example. They use it in print, they use it on social, they use it everywhere. And so on social specifically, they have learned that readers want to see what their peers are doing. And the times that they use editorial content versus the times that it's their readers' photos, the readers' photos get 3 times more likes, comments, and shares than the editorial content does, which is so sad for the journalists. The content's great, but in terms of like the actual engagement, they want to see their peers. And that's something that they've learned so much. And by engaging, they've actually created a lot of opportunity for sponsors as well, because they're getting that data. And that focus on data is so interesting because they are asking people on social to come to their site to engage. They're using those photos, but they're collecting that data, and it's open to everyone, not just subscribers. So then they're getting this data list that they can look at and go, okay, well, this half of our readers are subscribers. We already know who they are. But this half are, people that have come from social that we didn't necessarily know. This is a new target audience that we can kind of build a relationship with. And that's quite an interesting thing to do. You can choose between putting your engagement behind a subscription or actually using it as a try before you buy, at least let us know who you are kind of way of approaching it.
Yeah, I saw this interesting discussion about putting content behind a paywall, but leaving the community available for everyone to see and to engage in. And I think that's quite an interesting balance. Obviously, it depends on the publisher and someone's strategy and their content versus community model. It's showing the value of community for having that sense of belonging. And then the content is like a FOMO style thing that you can see what people are talking about. And you can see this, I don't know, let's say you miss out on an event. You don't get to go to an event, or you didn't get to see your TV show the other day. Then the next day, I remember when I was at school and I'd walk to school and everyone would be talking about The Apprentice last night, and you'd feel like you're missing out, but you're in on the conversation, but you're just missing out on the actual, okay, what are they talking about? And you can't join in. And so I think that's a quite interesting balance. And it's this idea of, okay, I need to create that slight frustration that shows the value of what people are interested in without actually giving you exactly what it is until you hand over some money or some value, some data or something.
Absolutely. And I think we talk about value exchange a lot. And the reason is, I think you should be flipping from one to the other. And I think the next example actually kind of personifies this to the next level. But when what you're offering has a very high value exchange for the reader, and that could mean, I don't know, they can win something, or they can access something that they wouldn't access usually, or the topic is really important, you can push for that extra action. The barrier to entry can be higher. Whereas when the barrier to value exchange is low, let's say you're just looking for sources for, I don't know, we're just looking for people who might identify as trans because we have questions around for the story. If you're pushing that to just be subscribers, then people are less likely to engage. So looking at that value exchange is also something that's really interesting. I'll show you the next example because I think this is the perfect example of that. So, and I think this is also a perfect example of what happens when you are engaging regularly anyway. So this is HBVL. They are also a local brand in Belgium. And they create call outs every single day anyway to their readers. They really focus on that value exchange. And because they create these call outs every day, when something like this happens, when their local football team reaches the final, they can make magic. And in this case, it was the local team reached the final. It was a bit of a surprise to everyone. And they were like, what can we do? Everybody can't go to the game, but could we do something special that allows everyone to go to the game? They went to the club. They asked them, hey, we've got an idea. What if we do something different? The club agreed. Next day, they create a call out. Takes no time at all. Hey, fans of KRC Genk, how about you send in your photo of your profile picture? We are going to print all of the photos of the fans on the bus and you are going to travel with the team to the final. They received 3,500 photos within 2 days. They had to actually close that call out at that point because it worked so well. They had a 44% increase in app downloads. And this is the thing. Everyone wants to be printed on a bus. Who wouldn't want to be on a bus? That's a high value exchange. Yeah. So the barrier to entry can be, well, actually, to get involved, you need to download the app and you need to register. Because all of a sudden, well, who doesn't want to be on a bus? So of course I'll do. And this also created a whole newsletter. 3,500 people, I think it was 99 something percent, signed up for the newsletter straight away, interested in what was going on for that team. So, but that's the thing. I think we are training two sets of people when we're engaging. We are training on one side, the editorial team, the journalist, to be used to this idea of doing it, to remove the fear. And if you're doing it regularly, when big news events happen, like floods, another COVID, something magical like the football, you can create magic because you know what to do. It takes minutes because you've done it before and it's not, oh, I need to work it out and I'm in a rush. But on the other side, it's also readers. When you build habits with readers to contribute to the fun stuff, to the little things, eventually you can build that relationship up to ask them for much, much harder news, because you wouldn't go up to a stranger and say, hey, how's your divorce? They're probably not going to tell you. Whereas if you'd had a couple of drinks with them and maybe, talked about the weather, eventually you go, how are you doing? How is your divorce? And that's a completely different relationship. Yeah. And that's what we're trying to create on digital, is still a real relationship where we don't just take, but we also give.
Yeah. So such a great way to think about it, and building up of that ask in different ways that's adapted to different types of readers, and gradually asking them for a little more, but also in different ways. And I love this example. It's a very fun example.
It's so great. I'm on a bus in Belgium as well, which I'm quite happy about. I had to upload. Of course. But I think it's the thinking through. Like, these are great examples. They exist, of course, but you don't just get there. You have to kind of know what you're doing. And I think we can have a moment to go through this UGC or CGC, there's a mistake there, engagement builder, and talk a bit about the thinking through to get to that point. Well, what I'll do is I'll use the bus example as the main example and how they might have got here. So I think the first thing to be thinking about is the aim, which you can see on this image, and you can download it as well. That is, what do you want to achieve? And this looks different for everyone. So for example, for HBVL, who we just spoke about a second ago, their focus when we started working with them was, we need more app downloads. App downloads is our main KPI. And so it's really interesting to frame it as, okay, what does our engagement look like if that is the number one aim? Number two is very much around who with, which teams are involved. And you mentioned earlier the whole silos things between product, marketing, editorial. I find that it's so easy in newsrooms for us all to be working on our own job, and we're all playing the same game and we're all going for the same goal, and yet we're kind of playing on our own pitches. And so actually thinking through who might be involved in this is really interesting, because I think a lot falls on editorial. I think it's just like editorial teams, journalists feel like they're getting mounted up with all of this work. And actually, sometimes when you've got some great ideas, there is a crossover that can be planned out beforehand.
Yeah.
So for example, I don't know, we create call outs every day, but the marketing team come into our tools to look at these call outs and see which ones are working, and they can pick up on building this further. Who for? Oh my gosh, thinking about who our audience is on point 3, who are we trying to engage, will change the way that we word stuff. And so in general, for the HBVL example, we are talking about app downloads. We're talking about getting the marketing team involved, but also the editorial team, potentially data to sign up to newsletters, for example. For point 3, who are we trying to get? In this case, so simple. We're looking for the fans of a specific football club. Can you picture who they are? Where do they go? Can you tell us how they like to be communicated with? Where do they spend their time? In this case, obviously, HBVL can contact the club directly and just say, hey, we're thinking of doing this. Would you like to join us? Can we do it with you? And I think we miss that out so much. We could be doing that with local schools. We could do institutions. We don't need to be the only ones to hold trust. We can actually build with a much wider community. Question 4, what's the value exchange? What is going to motivate our readers to act? Is it, and it could be so many things, is it because you're going to publish it in print? And if that's the case, we need to be telling people that we're going to do that. If it's going to make a difference to society, and they are topics that they feel like at least they can make a difference by sharing. Is it because they could win a prize? Is it because they're actually extremely proud of, I don't know, their child or the local school or their local community? Pride is such a strong one. Is it because it could be because they actually just want to connect with other people that work in the same industry? In the farming example, it's quite a lonely job. People want to see how others, and it's not what you're getting on social media. Don't get me wrong. You, as a farmer, I'm sure your algorithm is giving you a whole load of farming stuff, but it's giving you influencers in farming. It's not giving you other people that are like you in farming. And this is a place that we can hold dear. As news brands, it's like sharing what others like us are saying versus, the ones that are getting the algorithm are pushing. Point 5, the ask. And I think this is interesting because we could ask for so many things. One topic, i.e. pride, could look like, tell us your pride stories. Tell us, it's very hard to receive any content for that. Because everyone will just go, well, what is a pride story? Where do I start? It could be, okay, tell us your coming out stories. Tell us, have you ever felt threatened? What you ask completely changes the conversation. Yeah. For example, if I gave everyone a blank sheet and I was in a classroom and I said, draw something, most people will sit there for a minute and go, well, what am I going to draw? Whereas if I said, okay, draw a house, everyone will start straight away. Everyone knows where to start. They know where they're going.
Yeah. You need to give guidance.
Exactly. And then there's the modeling. You could pick one picture of the house up and go, oh my gosh, absolutely love how this person has added a chimney. And everyone all of a sudden will go, oh my gosh, I could add a chimney. Actually, I could add a picket fence as well. I think this is why social media's content is getting better and better. It's because people, are taking a challenge, a dance challenge, whatever it might be, and they're adding their twist and they're adding their extra bit. They are building up on top of each other. And actually, we need to be doing the same thing with our audience by giving them the great foundation and then showing them what it could look like so that they can build with us. So in the case of HBVL, the ask, obviously, they could have gone, well, the club's reached the final. That's a great opportunity for app downloads. Now, what are we asking for? And what are we doing with it? 6, metrics. What are your KPIs? Obviously, measuring is extremely important. I'd love it to see more people measuring quality as well and having a ranking system for that, because sometimes you might not receive a lot, but the quality of what you're receiving is so big that it might inspire others to get involved in the future. 7, zero waste. Please, if your audience engage with you, think about what is going to happen with that content. think about how you are going to thank them. How are you going to not waste that engagement in one way or another? You might receive too much, that's fine. Could you give a recap of what you learned from the overall and maybe not publish them all? Or could you publish them all and actually create a curated piece out of some of the most interesting ones? Could you get people voting for their favorite ones so that you respond to the favorites? There's so much that you can do that creates more content, that makes your job easier, but that also makes those readers feel like they were valued and going to the effort of engaging with you was worth it. 8.
Encourage them to do it again.
Exactly. Because they're not going to come back and do it again if nothing happened.
Yeah, exactly.
8, build a relationship. Can you build on the responses? What if people really into this? What is the next step? How will you thank them for their contribution? How does this moment when they've engaged build from here? For the nurses, they said they were nurses. Hey, how about we start writing a piece around what it's like in different countries? How do we then go on to strikes? I don't know, fans of Taylor Swift have engaged with you because they want to win tickets to the Taylor Swift concert. Are there other questions around Taylor Swift? Are you going to ask them about what they're going to wear? There's so much that can go. And once you've started that conversation, if it's successful, we need to be seeing it as a relationship, not extracting information out of someone to just publish more content. Mm-hmm. And number 9, and I think, is do it. Just do it and see. And I think fear stops us so much. And even do it manually. Don't need to do the whole thing. Start off with, what if we did this? How would it go? We're asking people for these things. We're just trying something out, being honest. We're just trying something new out. We want to hear your opinions on X. What happens? And then obviously review. What happens so much in newsrooms, because we are on our bike, we are constantly in a rush. We're overwhelmed with the amount of stuff to do. It's so easy to do an engaging piece of content, but then it never gets reviewed, which means it never goes back to the aim. And in theory, this should be a circle. So when we get to 10 and we've reviewed it, it might change 1, which might change 2, which might change 3. So this is, a bit of a framework that takes a bit of time at the beginning, but then becomes completely second nature once you've done it a few times. And this is what I would recommend we think about when we're building our engagement strategy.
It's incredibly useful and feels very like it hits all of the points, and something that, like you said, it's a feedback loop. It's something that's built upon, and that if someone did this for their first CGC, then that can be used to inform the next one. And each version of this framework that someone completes will hopefully get better and better and provide learnings for the next one.
Absolutely. It can feel daunting the first time round, but every time you do it, it gets easier.
Yeah.
It just takes a little bit of thinking through. And who in the team thinks this through is actually a really interesting question as well. But I'll leave that to every team in their own kind of world. But I'd love to know in feedback from anyone if they have one action that they're going to take away from this, because there are a lot of ideas in here and I know that it can be quite a lot. Little self-promotion. If you have any questions and we can help, Contribly can obviously help, but I'm just happy to have the conversations anyway. I'm here to be a bit of a sounding board. So, yeah.
No, well, thank you so much. I was going to say, if anyone wants to contact you, then through LinkedIn, I imagine, as well. And that was incredibly useful, especially the worksheet. I think that hopefully we can share that in a downloadable version or something afterwards, but provides a very achievable, useful, and breaking down the steps, that manageable, that's the word I'm looking for, manageable way of thinking about a big project. I mean, you see the thousands of people on a bus and you think, whoa, okay, hang on. But if you work through each of those steps, then it becomes manageable and achievable and really reminds you of why you're doing it, for who, and like how, basically.
And on the bus example, they built up to that.
Yeah.
They used that framework a couple of times before, a few times. They created call outs every day. And that meant that the magic could happen. When the big thing happened, they could just go, oh, yeah, let's just get thousands of people on a bus. Yeah. And within 3 days, it was printed. Like, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So key takeaway, start now, so that when those moments arrive, you're ready and you know how to do this well.
Yes, please, definitely.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Francesca. That was really, really interesting. And
Thank you.
I always love chatting to you. And I feel like the energy for these examples, it helps fuel people's energies to be able to try it. So I hope people go away inspired and get in touch with you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Perfect.
Thank you so much for having me, Madeline.
Pleasure. Always a pleasure. Great to chat with you. And I loved the examples as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I stopped.